In the beginning, our life seemed like a picture-perfect dream.
My name is David Williams, and my wife, Jessica, and I were living what many would call an ideal life in New York City. From the outside, it appeared we had it all: a loving relationship, a cozy apartment in a vibrant neighborhood, and the kind of lifestyle that most people only aspire to. But like many things in this city, our reality was far more complicated beneath the surface.
Our apartment, though small, had a certain charm that made it feel like home.
Located in a brownstone building on a tree-lined street in Brooklyn, it was the epitome of urban coziness. The living room was bathed in soft, natural light that streamed through large windows, which we often left open to let in the sounds of the bustling city. We decorated the space with vintage furniture and modern accents, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere that felt uniquely ours.
The walls were adorned with artwork we had collected over the years, each piece holding a memory or a story from our time together.
Jessica was the kind of woman who could make any place feel like home. She had an eye for detail and a talent for transforming even the most ordinary spaces into something special. Her love for interior design was evident in every corner of our apartment, from the carefully chosen throw pillows on the couch to the vibrant plants that brought life to our space.
We spent countless evenings curled up together, sharing wine and laughter, talking about our future, and dreaming of all the possibilities that lay ahead.
But beneath this idyllic facade, a growing sense of unease was beginning to take hold. Our life in New York, while beautiful in many ways, was not without its challenges. The city is a place of contrasts, where luxury and poverty exist side by side, and the pressure to succeed can be overwhelming. For us, those pressures were beginning to mount, and the strain of our financial situation was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Despite our efforts to maintain the appearance of a comfortable lifestyle, the reality was that we were struggling to make ends meet. New York is an expensive city, and the cost of living was starting to weigh heavily on us. Our cozy apartment, as charming as it was, came with a hefty price tag, and our combined income was barely enough to cover the rent, let alone the other expenses that came with living in such a demanding city. Jessica, in particular, felt the weight of our financial struggles.
She had always dreamed of living a life of luxury, surrounded by the finer things that New York had to offer. She envisioned herself shopping in the designer boutiques of Soho, dining in Michelin-starred restaurants, and attending glamorous events with the city's elite. But those dreams were becoming increasingly distant as the reality of our situation set in. The pressure was palpable. Jessica began to express her frustrations more openly, her once bright demeanor dimming under the weight of unmet expectations. The financial strain took a toll on her confidence and happiness, leaving her feeling trapped in a life that no longer aligned with her aspirations. She started to question the choices we had made and whether we were on the right path. Our conversations, once filled with hope and excitement, became fraught with tension as we grappled with the harsh realities of our situation. I, too, felt the burden, though I tried to mask it for Jessica's sake. I wanted to provide her with the life she had always dreamed of, but the truth was that we were barely scraping by. My job, while stable, was not enough to afford us the lifestyle we both desired. Each month was a struggle to pay the bills, and the constant worry about money began to seep into every aspect of our lives. The stress was relentless, and it was beginning to wear on us both. Despite the challenges, I held on to the belief that we could weather the storm. I loved Jessica deeply and was determined to find a way to give her the life she deserved. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, it became increasingly clear that something had to change. Our once idyllic life was beginning to crumble under the pressure. And I could see the toll it was taking on Jessica. She became more withdrawn, her smiles less frequent, her laughter more rare. The weight of our financial struggles was crushing her spirit, and I felt powerless to stop it. The dream life we had once shared was slipping away, replaced by a growing sense of desperation and uncertainty. As our world began to unravel, I couldn't help but wonder how much longer we could hold on before everything came crashing down. It was a crisp autumn evening in New York City.
The kind of night where the air had just the right amount of chill to it, making you pull your coat a little tighter around your shoulders. The city seemed to shimmer under the streetlights, the energy of the night palpable as people moved through the streets, heading to their various destinations. That night, Jessica had been invited to a charity gala by a group of friends, an event she had been looking forward to for weeks.
I remember she was excited about it, spending hours deciding on the perfect dress and accessories.
Wanting to look just right for the occasion. The gala was being held at an upscale venue in Manhattan, one of those grand old buildings with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, the kind of place that exuded both history and wealth. It was a benefit for a children's hospital, a noble cause that drew in the city's most affluent and influential figures. Jessica, always with a heart for good causes and an eye for social opportunities, was naturally drawn to the event.
She had that spark of excitement in her eyes as she left the apartment. Dressed in a stunning evening gown that hugged her figure and accentuated her elegance. I remember watching her as she walked out the door, thinking how lucky I was to have her in my life. At the time, I had no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary. To me, it was just another night, another event in a long string of social engagements that Jessica often attended. We had both become accustomed to the various charity events and galas that came with living in New York City, seeing them as just another part of our social routine. I trusted her completely and believed that this evening would be no different from the others. She would go, enjoy the night, and come home with stories about who she met and the causes that had been supported. But that night was different. It was the night Jessica met Adam Harper. Adam Harper was the kind of man who commanded attention the moment he walked into a room. Tall, with a lean, athletic build and a face that looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine, he was the epitome of charisma and confidence. His success as a businessman only added to his allure. Adam was known throughout the city as a shrewd and ambitious entrepreneur, someone who had built his fortune from the ground up and who had a reputation for getting what he wanted. He moved through the crowd at the gala with ease, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, his charm effortlessly drawing people toward him. When Jessica was introduced to Adam by one of her friends, she was immediately struck by his presence. He had a way of making people feel like they were the only ones in the room. His intense blue eyes locking onto hers as they spoke, making her feel seen and appreciated in a way that had become rare in our life together. Their conversation flowed easily, moving from the charitable cause that had brought them to the gala to more personal topics, with Adam skillfully guiding the exchange with the kind of smoothness that only comes with years of practice. He was interested in her, that much was clear from the start. He listened intently as she talked about her life, her aspirations, and the challenges she faced. He complimented her on her beauty and intelligence, making her feel special and valued in a way that our financial struggles had recently made difficult. Adam was everything that I was not at that moment, a man of wealth, power, and ease, someone who could offer Jessica the kind of life she had always dreamed of, or so it seemed. Jessica, for her part, was both flattered and intrigued. It had been a long time since she had felt this kind of attention. The kind that made her feel alive and desirable. The pressures of our financial situation had taken a toll on both of us, and though we still loved each other deeply, the spark that had once defined our relationship had begun to fade. Meeting Adam was like a breath of fresh air for Jessica, a reminder of the excitement and luxury that she longed for, a stark contrast to the struggles she faced in our daily lives. As the night went on, they spent more and more time together, mingling with the other guests but always finding their way back to each other. Adam was careful not to overstep, keeping the interaction friendly and light, but there was an undeniable chemistry between them, a connection that neither could ignore. By the time the evening came to an end, Jessica felt a thrill that she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of possibility that both excited and confused her. When she returned home later that night, I could see that something was different. She was more animated, her eyes bright with the lingering energy of the evening. She told me about the gala, about the people she had met, and how wonderful it had all been. But when she mentioned Adam Harper, it was with a casualness that didn't quite match the glint in her eye. She described him as an interesting and successful man, someone she had enjoyed talking to, but nothing more than that.
At the time, I didn't think much of it. After all, Jessica often met interesting people at these events.
Looking back, I realize how naive I was. I had no idea that this seemingly innocent encounter was the beginning of something that would ultimately unravel the life we had built together.
Adam Harper was not just another man Jessica had met at a gala. He was the catalyst for everything that was about to change. But on that night, I was blissfully unaware, thinking that life would continue as it always had, never suspecting that this brief encounter would lead us down a path of deception, betrayal, and heartbreak.
In the weeks that followed Jessica's first encounter with Adam Harper, subtle but unmistakable changes began to take hold in our lives. At first, they were barely noticeable, just small shifts in her behavior that I brushed off as the natural ebb and flow of any relationship.
But as time went on, those small changes grew into something much more significant, something that I could no longer ignore. Jessica began spending more and more time with Adam, often under the guise of working on various charitable projects.
She told me that he was helping her organize and fundraise for causes she was passionate about, and on the surface, it all seemed legitimate. Jessica had always been deeply involved in philanthropy, and the idea that she was now working closely with a successful businessman like Adam seemed like a positive development. She spoke of him often, describing how knowledgeable he was, and how generous with his time and resources. But there was something in the way she talked about him, a certain light in her eyes that hadn't been there before, that made me uneasy. At first, I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, telling myself that I was overreacting and that there was nothing to worry about. After all, Jessica and I had been through a lot together, and our relationship had always been built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. I convinced myself that this was just another one of those phases, a temporary shift that would eventually pass. But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear that this was not just a passing phase. Jessica started coming home later and later, often citing meetings or events she had to attend with Adam. She would breeze through the door, her face flushed with excitement, and when I would ask her how her day had been, she would give me vague, dismissive answers, as if the details were unimportant. The warmth and openness that had once defined our conversations began to disappear, replaced by a growing sense of distance and disconnection. I could see that something was wrong, but whenever I tried to bring it up, Jessica would brush me off, telling me that I was being paranoid and that I needed to trust her. She insisted that her relationship with Adam was purely professional, that they were working together for the greater good, and that I had nothing to worry about. But her words did little to ease my mind. There was a tension between us that hadn't been there before, an undercurrent of frustration and resentment that seemed to color every interaction. Jessica's behavior became increasingly erratic. She was more irritable, snapping at me over the smallest things, and then apologizing just as quickly, as if she realized she was overreacting. The woman who had once been so full of life, so loving and supportive, was becoming someone I barely recognized. It was as if the pressures of our financial situation, combined with her growing involvement with Adam, were slowly chipping away at the person she used to be. I noticed that she was spending more time on her appearance, too. Not that she had ever let herself go. Jessica had always taken pride in looking her best, but now there was an added layer of effort, a new intensity to her grooming routine. She started buying more expensive clothes, carefully selecting outfits that seemed designed to impress, rather than just for the sake of fashion. She would spend hours getting ready, her focus entirely on perfecting every detail of her look. When I commented on it, she would laugh it off, saying that she just wanted to make a good impression at the events she attended. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. At night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us felt even more pronounced. We used to talk for hours before falling asleep, sharing our thoughts, our dreams, and our fears. But now, those conversations had all but disappeared. Jessica would lie next to me, scrolling through her phone, responding to messages and emails with an intensity that left little room for anything else. When I tried to engage her, She would give me short, distracted answers, her mind elsewhere.
It was as if a wall had been erected between us, one that I couldn't break through no matter how hard I tried.
The physical side of our relationship began to suffer as well.
The intimacy that had once been a cornerstone of our marriage became increasingly rare. And when it did happen, it felt forced and mechanical.
There was no longer that deep connection, that sense of being fully present with one another.
Instead, there was a growing sense of obligation, as if we were going through the motions without any real passion or desire.
I could feel her pulling away from me, both emotionally and physically, and it terrified me. The worst part was that I didn't know how to fix it. I wanted to talk to her, to address the growing rift between us, but every time I tried, I was met with defensiveness or outright denial. She would tell me that I was imagining things, that I was being unreasonable, and that I needed to trust her.
But how could I trust her when everything in my gut was telling me that something was wrong? As the days went on, my mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. Was she having an affair with Adam?
Was I losing her to this man who seemed to have everything I couldn't provide? The thought was almost too much to bear. But I couldn't ignore the signs that were right in front of me. I felt helpless, trapped in a situation that was spiraling out of control, and I didn't know what to do.
Jessica's growing discontent was like a dark cloud hanging over our lives, casting a shadow over everything that had once brought us joy. The laughter that had once filled our home was gone, replaced by silence and tension. The love that had once been so strong between us was now tainted by suspicion and doubt.
And the future that we had once dreamed of together seemed to be slipping further and further out of reach. I knew that something had to change, that we couldn't go on like this forever.
But as much as I wanted to confront the situation head-on, I was afraid of what I might find if I dug too deep. So, I did what I could to keep the peace, to hold on to the remnants of our life together, hoping that somehow, things would return to the way they used to be.
But deep down, I knew that the cracks in our marriage were growing wider, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down.
As the weeks turned into months, the subtle changes in Jessica's behavior became glaringly obvious. It wasn't just the late nights or the distant stares anymore. It was something much more profound, something that I could feel in the very fabric of our relationship. The woman who had once been my partner in every sense of the word was now slipping through my fingers, lost in a world that I could no longer reach.
And though I tried to ignore the truth, deep down I knew that something was wrong. It wasn't long before my worst fears were confirmed.
Jessica, the woman I had loved and cherished for so many years, had become involved in a secret affair with Adam Harper. It began innocently enough, dinners after late-night meetings, coffee in the mornings before work, but it didn't take long for their relationship to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. Adam was everything I wasn't at that moment: wealthy, powerful, confident.
He knew exactly what to say to make Jessica feel valued, desired, and, most importantly, understood.
Their affair was conducted with a level of secrecy that left me completely in the dark. Jessica became an expert at covering her tracks, creating elaborate lies about where she was going and what she was doing.
She would tell me that she was meeting friends or attending a work function when in reality, she was spending those evenings in the company of Adam.
They would dine at the finest restaurants, places I could never afford to take her.
Adam showered her with expensive gifts, jewelry, designer clothes, even a new handbag that she insisted was a gift from a friend. Each of these items became a symbol of the widening gap between us, a gap that Adam seemed all too eager to exploit. With every passing day, Jessica drifted further and further away from me. Our conversations, once filled with warmth and laughter, became stilted and cold. She no longer shared her thoughts or feelings with me, choosing instead to confide in Adam, the man who had become her confidant, her lover. The connection we once shared, the bond that had held us together through thick and thin, was now shattered, replaced by a growing sense of alienation and mistrust. Adam was a master manipulator, and he played his role to perfection. He knew exactly how to pull Jessica's strings, how to make her feel like she was the most important person in the world.
He promised her a life of luxury and ease, a life free from the financial burdens that had plagued us for so long.
He painted a picture of a future where she would never have to worry about money again, where she would be free to pursue her dreams without the constraints of our modest lifestyle. It was a future filled with opulence, glamour, and the kind of security that I could never provide. Jessica, who had always longed for the finer things in life, was easily seduced by these promises. She began to believe that our marriage was doomed, that I was holding her back from the life she truly deserved. Adam was offering her everything she had ever wanted, and she was more than willing to leave me behind in pursuit of that dream. The man who had once been her husband, her partner, was now little more than an obstacle in her path to happiness. Their affair intensified, becoming more brazen with each passing day. They would steal away to secluded hotels, places far enough from the city that they could indulge in their illicit romance without fear of being discovered. Jessica, who had once been so careful to maintain the appearance of a devoted wife, now found herself completely under Adam's spell. She would return home late at night, her clothes smelling faintly of his cologne, her eyes glazed over with the thrill of their forbidden love. I noticed the changes in her immediately. She became more withdrawn, more irritable, and less interested in the life we had built together. The affection she once showed me had all but disappeared, replaced by a cold indifference that cut me to the core. She would spend hours on her phone, texting Adam while I sat in the same room, oblivious to the fact that she was planning her escape from our marriage. The love we had once shared, the love that had sustained us through so many hardships, was now crumbling before my eyes. It wasn't just her behavior that changed, her entire demeanor shifted. She became more critical of me, pointing out my flaws and shortcomings in a way that she never had before. It was as if she had convinced herself that I was the problem, that our life together was the root of all her unhappiness. And in a way, I suppose I was. I couldn't compete with Adam's wealth, his charm, or the glamorous life he was offering her. I was just an ordinary man, trying to make ends meet in a city that had become increasingly hostile to people like us. The more time Jessica spent with Adam, the more she began to resent me. She saw in him a way out, a chance to start over and leave behind the life we had built together. And the more she distanced herself from me, the more I could feel the walls closing in around me. I was losing her, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The affair became an open secret, though I was the last to know. Friends and acquaintances began to notice the changes in Jessica, the way she seemed to glow when Adam was mentioned, the way she avoided talking about our marriage. Rumors began to circulate, whispers that I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. It was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down, before I was forced to confront the reality that Jessica had chosen Adam over me. The promises Adam made to Jessica were seductive and intoxicating. And she believed every word. He convinced her that their love was real, that it was worth sacrificing everything for. He promised her a future where she would never have to worry about money, where she would be adored and cherished in a way that I could never provide. And in her desperation to escape the life we had built, Jessica believed him. Our marriage, once a source of strength and comfort, was now a prison from which Jessica was determined to break free. She saw in Adam the key to her freedom, the man who could give her the life she had always dreamed of. As she slipped further and further into his grasp, I could feel the life we had built together slipping away, leaving me alone in the ruins of our love. The first signs of betrayal were subtle, almost imperceptible. A few missed deadlines, a contract that fell through at the last minute, a client who suddenly decided to take their business elsewhere. At first, I chalked it up to bad luck, the kind of setbacks that every business owner faces from time to time. But as the weeks went by, the losses began to pile up, and it became clear that this was more than just a rough patch. Something was very wrong. I had worked hard to build my business from the ground up. It wasn't easy, especially in a city as competitive as New York, but I had always prided myself on my ability to navigate the challenges that came my way. I had a solid client base, a dedicated team, and a reputation for delivering results. But now, all of that was slipping through my fingers. And I couldn't understand why.
Jessica seemed increasingly distant during this time, more preoccupied than ever with her meetings and projects. She was always busy, always out late, and when she was home, she was distracted and lost in her thoughts. Whenever I tried to talk to her about what was happening with the business, she would brush it off, telling me that I was overreacting and that everything would work out in the end.
But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. One day, I received a call from a longtime client, one of the most important accounts in the company. They informed me that they were ending our partnership, effective immediately. No explanation, no room for negotiation, just a cold, final decision. I was stunned. This was a client I had worked with for years, someone I considered more of a partner than a customer. Losing them was a devastating blow, and it set off a chain reaction that sent my business into a tailspin. As I scrambled to figure out what had gone wrong, more clients began to follow suit, pulling their contracts and moving their business elsewhere. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, and everything I had worked so hard to build was unraveling before my eyes. I spent countless sleepless nights poring over emails, contracts, and financial records, trying to find some clue, some explanation for what was happening. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find anything until I did. One evening, after another long and frustrating day at the office, I came home to find Jessica sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She didn't notice me at first, so engrossed was she in whatever she was doing. Curious, I approached her quietly, peering over her shoulder at the screen. What I saw made my blood run cold. She was drafting an email to Adam Harper, attaching documents that I immediately recognized as sensitive client information, information that should never have left the confines of my office. At that moment, everything clicked into place: the sudden loss of clients, the failed contracts, the suspicious timing of our setbacks. Jessica was betraying me, feeding Adam the very lifeblood of my business, and I had been too blind to see it. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? How deeply was she involved? And why? I felt a sickening sense of betrayal, the kind that reaches deep into your soul and tears it apart. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about the deliberate destruction of everything I had worked for. Everything we had built together. I must have made a noise, because Jessica suddenly looked up, her eyes widening in shock as she realized I was standing there. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Then, without a word, she slammed the laptop shut and stood up, her face a mask of guilt and fear. But it was too late, the damage was done. I demanded an explanation, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Jessica tried to deny it at first, claiming that it wasn't what it looked like. That she was just helping Adam with something unrelated. But the evidence was right there in front of me, undeniable and damning. I pressed her, my anger giving way to a desperate need to understand how the woman I loved could betray me so completely. Eventually, the truth came spilling out. Jessica had been feeding Adam information for months, helping him undercut my business in exchange for the lavish promises he had made to her. She told me that she hadn't meant for things to go this far. That she thought it was just harmless business, but I could see the lies in her eyes. She had been complicit in the destruction of my livelihood, and there was no coming back from that. As she spoke, I felt a cold, hard knot of rage form in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just about losing money or clients. This was about trust, about the sacred bond between a husband and wife. Jessica had shattered that bond, and in doing so, she had destroyed something far more valuable than any business deal. I could barely look at her. The woman who had once been the center of my world was now reduced to a stranger who had stabbed me in the back when I was most vulnerable. In the days that followed, I tried to piece together the full extent of Jessica's betrayal. I spent hours combing through emails, text messages, and financial records, searching for any sign of collusion between her and Adam. What I found only confirmed my worst fears. Jessica had been actively working against me, using her knowledge of my business to help Adam destroy it from the inside out. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted with my life, had not only betrayed me with another man but had also become an accomplice in the deliberate destruction of everything I had built. The enormity of her treachery was almost too much to bear. At first, I refused to believe it. I told myself that there had to be some other explanation, some way to reconcile what I was seeing with the woman I thought I knew. But as the evidence continued to pile up, there was no denying the truth. Jessica had chosen Adam over me, and in doing so, she had betrayed everything we had once stood for. The anger and hurt that coursed through me were overwhelming, a storm of emotions that threatened to consume me. I felt like a fool, like I had been living in a dream while my life was being torn apart right under my nose. But beneath the rage and sorrow, there was something else, something darker, more insidious. A cold, calculating determination began to take hold, a desire for revenge that I could no longer ignore. If Jessica and Adam thought they could destroy me without consequence, they were gravely mistaken. I would not go down without a fight, and I would make sure they both paid dearly for what they had done. The time for denial and hesitation was over. It was time to act, to take back control of my life and my business, and to show them both just how wrong they had been to underestimate me. In the aftermath of my discovery, every emotion in me clamored for release: anger, betrayal, devastation. But amidst the storm, a chilling clarity began to emerge. A confrontation with Jessica and Adam would be too easy, too impulsive. It wouldn't satisfy the deep-seated need I had to make them truly understand the magnitude of their betrayal. No, what I craved was something far more calculated, something that would ensure they paid for every ounce of pain they had inflicted on me. Revenge wouldn't be swift or simple. It would be precise, methodical, and inescapable. I knew that to take down Adam Harper, I needed more than just anger, I needed ammunition. My remaining connections, though fewer than before, were still powerful. Years in the business world have taught me how to cultivate relationships and leverage them when necessary. It was time to call in those favors. The first step was to understand exactly who I was dealing with. Adam had been operating in the shadows of New York's financial world for years. Known more for his charm and connections than for any real business acumen. But those in the know whispered about his involvement in less than legitimate ventures, shell companies, offshore accounts, and a string of businesses that served as fronts for something darker. I needed proof of these rumors, hard evidence that could expose him for the fraud he was. I began by reaching out to an old contact, someone who had worked in financial forensics. We hadn't spoken in years, but the favor I had done him long ago still held weight. He owed me, and now it was time to collect. I didn't reveal everything, only that I was investigating a competitor and needed to uncover any skeletons in their closet. He agreed to help, and within days, he provided me with a list of names, people who had crossed paths with Adam in his less than savory dealings. With this information in hand, I began to dig deeper. I spent countless hours poring over financial records, tracking the flow of money through Adam's various enterprises. It was a painstaking process. But the more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Adam wasn't just a businessman, he was a criminal, involved in everything from money laundering to tax evasion. He had built his empire on lies, deceit, and a network of corrupt officials who looked the other way. As I gathered more evidence, I started to piece together a plan. Exposing Adam wouldn't just be about ruining his reputation, it would be about dismantling everything he had built. I wanted to see his empire crumble. To watch as the foundations he had so carefully constructed were torn apart by the very system he had tried to manipulate. And I wanted Jessica to see it all, to witness the destruction of the man she had betrayed me for. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, people who would help me bring Adam down. I reached out to a few trusted associates, individuals who had their reasons for wanting to see Adam fall. We formed a small, secretive group, each of us playing a different role in the plan. One would leak information to the press, another would quietly alert the authorities to Adam's activities, and another would ensure that Adam's connections in the financial world were cut off, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. The first strike came in the form of a well-timed leak. A prominent journalist, known for his exposés on corporate corruption, received an anonymous tip about Adam's offshore accounts. The article that followed was explosive, detailing a web of financial deception that implicated Adam in a series of illegal transactions. It was the first crack in the facade, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. Next, we targeted his businesses. Through a series of carefully orchestrated maneuvers, we began to undermine his operations. Contracts were pulled, partnerships dissolved, and key clients were persuaded to take their business elsewhere. Adam's empire, once seemingly invincible, started to falter. The losses began to mount, and for the first time, Adam found himself on the defensive. But the final blow came when we involved the authorities. The evidence we had gathered was overwhelming, enough to ensure that Adam would face serious legal consequences. A detailed report was sent to the appropriate agencies, outlining his involvement in money laundering, fraud, and tax evasion. It wasn't long before the investigation was opened, and Adam found himself at the center of a growing scandal. As the pressure mounted, Adam's carefully curated image began to unravel. The man who had once seemed untouchable was now facing the very real possibility of losing everything: his business, his fortune, and his freedom. His connections, those who had once protected him, began to distance themselves, unwilling to be dragged down by his downfall. And through it all, Jessica watched in horror as the life she had chosen over our marriage crumbled before her eyes. The man she had betrayed me for was revealed as a fraud, and his promises of wealth and security were shattered. She was left with nothing, her dreams of a luxurious life destroyed by the very person she had placed her trust in. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that she had thrown away everything for a man who was about to lose it all. But there was no satisfaction in her suffering, only a cold, hollow sense of justice. Jessica had made her choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. As for Adam, his fate was sealed. The investigation led to multiple charges, and with the evidence against him so overwhelming, there was no escaping the inevitable. His assets were frozen, his businesses seized. And his name became synonymous with corruption and deceit. In the end, he was just another fallen titan, brought down by his greed and arrogance. And I, having orchestrated it all, stood on the sidelines, watching as the pieces fell into place. There was no celebration, no moment of triumph, just a quiet, steady resolve that I had done what needed to be done. My business was still struggling, but I knew that with Adam out of the picture, I had a chance to rebuild, to start over. Revenge had been a dangerous game. One that had taken me to the edge and back. But in the end, it was the only way to reclaim my life, to take back what had been stolen from me. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that I could finally move on, leaving behind the wreckage of the past. Adam Harper's downfall was both swift and catastrophic, like a carefully constructed house of cards collapsing with a single, decisive flick. It all began with the relentless media scrutiny that followed the exposé on his illegal financial dealings. The once respected businessman, known for his charisma and seemingly Midas-like touch, was now a pariah in the corporate world. Every day, new revelations surfaced: secret offshore accounts, fraudulent investments, and a trail of deceit that spanned years. The fallout was immediate. Investors, who had once clamored to be associated with Adam's ventures, began to withdraw their support en masse. His businesses, which had seemed untouchable, began to unravel. Contracts were voided, partnerships dissolved, and stocks plummeted. What had taken Adam years to build was now crumbling in a matter of weeks. For Jessica, the realization of what she had sacrificed for this man came like a slow, dawning nightmare. She had been seduced by Adam's promises of wealth and luxury, convinced that he could provide her with the life she had always dreamed of. But as his empire disintegrated, those promises turned to ashes. The lavish gifts, the opulent dinners, the whispers of a life far removed from our modest existence, all vanished in the blink of an eye.
Jessica's reputation, once sterling in her social circles, was now tainted by her association with Adam. The same friends who had introduced her to him, who had envied her supposed good fortune, began to distance themselves.
They whispered behind her back, questioning her judgment, her morals, and her loyalty.
The charity events and high society gatherings that had once been the highlight of her social calendar became arenas of quiet scorn and veiled gossip.
She was no longer the admired socialite. She was the woman who had thrown away her marriage for a man now exposed as a criminal.
The final blow came when Adam, facing an onslaught of legal challenges and the imminent threat of prison, fled. Disgraced and desperate, he vanished from the public eye, leaving behind a wake of destruction.
He abandoned Jessica without a second thought, taking with him the remnants of his fortune and any hope she had of salvaging their illicit relationship. She was left utterly alone, betrayed by the very man for whom she had betrayed me.
The life Jessica had imagined, filled with luxury and ease, had turned into a bitter struggle for survival. Her once comfortable existence was now marked by financial uncertainty and social isolation. The apartment, once a symbol of our shared success, now felt like a gilded cage, a constant reminder of what she had lost.
Her career, once promising, was in shambles.
Her connections, tainted by her association with Adam, were unwilling or unable to help her regain her footing.
But more than the loss of wealth or status, it was the loss of self that haunted Jessica. She had placed all her hopes and dreams in a man who had proven to be as false as the promises he made.
The realization that she had destroyed her marriage, her stability, and her future for a mirage was more than she could bear. As for me, I watched from a distance as Jessica's world fell apart.
There was no pleasure in her suffering, no sense of vindication in seeing her brought so low.
The revenge I had sought was never about inflicting pain for pain's sake. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. And now, with Adam gone and Jessica reaping the consequences of her choices, I felt a strange sense of closure.
The man who had once been a rival was now a ghost, his name a cautionary tale in the annals of New York's business world.
The woman who had once been my wife was now a stranger, living in the ruins of the life she had chosen over ours.
There was no going back, no undoing the past.
But there was, finally, the possibility of moving forward, free from the shadow of betrayal, free to rebuild what had been lost. In the end, Adam's downfall was not just a victory for me. It was a testament to the dangers of greed, arrogance, and deceit. And as I turned my gaze toward the future, I knew that I had emerged from this dark chapter not just as a survivor, but as someone who had learned the true cost of trust and the strength it takes to reclaim one's life from the ashes. In the weeks and months that followed Adam's downfall, I threw myself into my work with a determination that bordered on obsession. My business, once teetering on the brink of collapse, became the focal point of my existence. I rebuilt it brick by brick, client by client, fueled by the need to restore what had been stolen from me.
The financial losses, the betrayal, the humiliation, I used them all as motivation to rise from the ashes. It wasn't easy. The world of business, especially in New York, is unforgiving. The setbacks I had suffered left deep scars, both on my reputation and my confidence. I had to regain the trust of clients who had been shaken by the turmoil and had to prove that I was still a force to be reckoned with. It took countless late nights, endless meetings, and a level of focus I hadn't known I possessed. But slowly, steadily, the tide began to turn. New deals started to flow in, tentative at first, then with increasing frequency. The contracts I secured were hard-won, but each one was a step closer to restoring my standing in the industry. The financial strain began to ease as the revenue streams stabilized, and with them, my confidence started to return. I was once again in control, shaping my destiny rather than being at the mercy of it. Yet, as my career regained momentum, I couldn't ignore the gnawing emptiness that persisted within me. Success, I had always believed, would be the salve that healed the wounds of betrayal.
But no matter how many contracts I signed, no matter how much I accomplished, the void remained. My life, once full of shared dreams and companionship, now felt strangely hollow.
I moved into a new apartment, a place far removed from the one I had shared with Jessica. It was modern, stylish, and every bit the symbol of my renewed success.
But it was also devoid of the warmth that had once filled our home.
There were no traces of shared memories, no echoes of laughter or quiet moments of connection. It was a space designed for one, a reflection of the solitary existence I now led. Socially, I kept my distance from others. Colleagues would invite me to gatherings, but I rarely accepted.
The few times I did, I found myself disengaged, unable to muster genuine interest in the conversations that swirled around me.
I had become a spectator in my own life, present in body but absent in spirit. I thought often of Jessica during this time, though not with anger or resentment. Instead, there was a deep sadness. A mourning for what could have been. The woman I had loved, who had once been my partner and my confidant, was now a distant memory. She had made her choices, and I had made mine, but the finality of it all weighed heavily on me. Our marriage, once full of promise, was now just another casualty of our shared failures. As the dust settled and my life found a semblance of normalcy, I began to realize a truth that I had been avoiding. The revenge I had so meticulously planned, the retribution I had so desperately sought, had not brought me the satisfaction I had envisioned. Instead, it left me with a profound sense of emptiness, a stark contrast to the fulfillment I had hoped to achieve. I had believed that Adam's destruction would bring closure, that seeing Jessica suffer the consequences of her choices would provide me with some measure of peace. But standing amidst the ruins of our marriage, I found no solace, only a cold, unyielding void. My victory over Adam felt hollow, and the life I had rebuilt, though successful on the surface, seemed superficial and disconnected from any deeper meaning. The freedom I had gained came at a cost I hadn't anticipated. I was free from the lies, the betrayal, and the toxic relationship that had once consumed me. But I was also free from the love, the companionship, and the shared dreams that had once defined my existence. In seeking to reclaim my life, I had lost something far more precious: my sense of purpose, my connection to another human being, and perhaps, a part of my soul. I often found myself wandering through the city, the vibrant energy of New York a stark contrast to the desolation I felt inside. The streets were alive with people, each seemingly engaged in their own stories of love, ambition, and struggle. But I felt like an outsider, detached from the world around me. The city that had once inspired me now served as a constant reminder of what I had lost. The nights were the hardest. Alone in my apartment, with nothing but my thoughts for company, I would replay the events of the past year in my mind. The discovery of Jessica's betrayal, the plotting of Adam's downfall, the moments of triumph that had felt so fleeting. And always, there was the question that haunted me: was it worth it? Had my quest for revenge, for justice, truly given me anything of value? In the end, the answer was clear. The price of my freedom, the cost of my revenge, was far too high. I had lost not just my marriage, but a part of myself in the process. The man I had become, hardened by betrayal and driven by vengeance, was a far cry from the person I once was. I had achieved my goals, but at what cost? My soul had paid the price, leaving me with nothing but a hollow victory. I knew then that it was time to let go. To stop dwelling on the past, to stop seeking meaning in the ruins of what once was. It was time to move forward, to try to find a new purpose, even if that meant starting from scratch. But I also knew that the scars of this experience would stay with me. A reminder of the darkness that revenge can bring. As I looked out over the city from my apartment window, I made a silent vow to myself, to live, not for the ghosts of the past, but for the possibility of a future, however uncertain it might be. The journey ahead would be difficult, and the road lonely, but it was the only path left to me.
The end of this chapter was not the one I had imagined, but it was an end nonetheless.
And so, with a heart heavy with the weight of my choices, I turned away from the window and stepped into the unknown,
ready to face whatever came next. The past was behind me, the future uncertain, but in that uncertainty, I hoped to find something resembling peace.